I have searched many years on end. There was none that my soul could depend. My soul cries out for your presence in here. This very hour, for your presence in here. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the peace I seek. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the joy I seek. I have searched many years on end. There was none that my soul could depend. My soul cries out for your presence in here. This very hour, for your presence in here. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the peace I seek. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the joy I seek. In your presence I am free from the chain that has bound me. In your presence I am calm, waiting for the kingdom come. In your presence I am free from the chain that has bound me. In your presence I am calm, waiting for the kingdom come. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the peace I seek. In His name I find, in His name I find, in His name I find the joy I seek.
Hey everybody, I'm Danielle Devine and I am here with Dave Connor and we are live from the house for our first night on our Real Faith, Real Talk series. It's actually called Real Talk, Real Faith. And I'm so excited to be here with Dave. We have a great lineup for you tonight because we are going to have the amazing and handsome, if I must say, Derek Devine on after Dave. Dave, you're handsome too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But he is going to be on after our interview, and that's going to be a pre-recorded sermon that he did a couple months ago, and that's called The Jesus Man. So it's going to be a really good talk for all you gentlemen out there, and I think all you ladies will get something from it too. One of the lights behind us is kind of spazzing out, so it just keeps changing color. So if it does that, we know about it, but it's too late to do anything. So, Dave, I've been seeing you tune into these talks. How have you been enjoying the live stream?
It's amazing to have you in our home every night. I go, wow, we're having dinner with our sellers. They're in the living room with us, and all the guests that you have. It's been fabulous.
Good. So I haven't really seen you, but you've seen me.
Oh, yeah.
He's like too much. Anyways. So your son, I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, Grant Connor.
Yes.
And it was such a good interview, and he talked about how he fell into addiction, how he was raised in the church and fell into addiction. How was that for you? That must have been such a hard thing as a parent.
Well, for both me and my wife, Susan, it was like having a pit in our stomach all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember when he was a child and he was sick and went to the hospital. We knew he would get better.
Yeah.
But when he was in addiction, we had no control.
Yeah.
And it just created a pit in our stomach, and we just ached all the time.
So tonight I'm going to be talking to Dave about what is it like to be a parent with a child who struggles with addiction, or a family member, or someone that you love, because I know there's so many people out there that have someone they love who are struggling with addiction, and maybe you don't know what to do, or maybe you feel alone, or you feel like nobody understands how you're feeling, and that's just not the case. And so that's why we brought Dave on today. He teaches in our School of Transformation. He's an amazing teacher. He's a longtime family friend and a longtime friend of the Father's House. But you've been going to the Nazarene Church for many years.
Yes.
And we love the Nazarene Church. So tell us a little bit, Dave, about Grant's time in addiction. And, you know, there was some really hopeless times for you, and then he kind of got it back on track, and then he fell off the wagon again. So tell us kind of real quick about that.
Well, the first time was in about 2006.
Yeah.
He moved out of the house, moved to Chico, and we could tell he was out of control.
Yeah.
We didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I think he did more like cocaine, ecstasy type drugs, but something was wrong. And then he came to us and said, I got to get out of Chico. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And he asked to go to a Christian college, and we're going, yay!
Yeah,
Wouldn't every
right.
parents want their kids to go to a Christian college?
Yeah.
So he went to Kentucky,
Yeah.
and then for 1 year, and then
Yeah.
we thought that was good, but it didn't
Didn't end up
continue.
being very good, no. So he came back from Kentucky
Yeah.
and really struggled with addiction.
Yeah.
And you and your wife noticed that something was different, or how did that go?
This was in May of 2007, and it just happened to be that your dad asked me to teach Wednesday nights here at the
Yeah,
Father's
that's
House.
good.
So I was teaching here on Wednesday nights, and Grant was moved at home, but
Yeah.
we noticed he was starting to get a little out of control, and he was hanging out with different people.
Yeah.
And he also was getting, kind of manic. He
Yep.
wouldn't sleep. And so it started creating that pit in our stomach, like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with our son?
Yeah. Which must have been, as a parent, just hopeless feeling.
It was. And like my wife Susie says, it never is good, feels good when your kids aren't doing good.
No.
Okay.
And, we have some parents out there whose kid, we see Grant, and it's like, you just are like, he struggled with addiction. Like, you can't even see it anymore. He's come so far. So it's easy for people to just think like, wow, you guys, you're good, you got it figured out. But do you want to just speak to parents who has maybe kids with addiction, and tell them that they're not alone, and that you guys, what you guys have gone through, kind of?
Well, like I said, it was extremely hard. It was a great test of our faith. It was an extreme trial, and you felt hopeless at times. But the one thing we did have is we had people praying for us.
Yeah.
And that's hard because you don't want to really admit that your kids are having problems, especially if it's drugs.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a teacher in the church.
And a leader, right?
And a leader, you don't want to go, hey, my kid has a problem with addiction.
It's hard.
It was humbling ourselves and asking certain people to pray for us.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I recommend is get a team of people praying
That's
for
so
you.
good.
And then to do that, you have to admit it.
Yeah, you have to come forward and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's so important. So you were talking to me before this interview started, and it got really dark for Dick Grant. He ended up homeless. He ended up really bad. And there was, during this season, it was 10 years, about 11 or 12 years ago now.
Yeah, 13.
13 years ago, oh my gosh. Where you were teaching here at the Father's House, actually, and tell us how God used that to help you and your wife.
Yeah, the more I taught, it seemed the worse Grant got.
Yeah.
And he was,
So you were here on Wednesday nights teaching for about 4 or
Yeah.
5 weeks, something like that?
No, I taught 13 straight weeks.
13 weeks on Wednesday night during the summer.
And it was the only peace I had all
Yeah.
summer,
Wow.
was teaching this class. It was so hectic. It was so chaotic. We didn't know what was wrong with Grant because he told us he wasn't doing drugs.
Yeah.
All right, so we go, okay, if you're not doing drugs, what's wrong?
Yeah, and that's the hard thing too, because you're not just hurting, but you feel crazy.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they're so good. Drug addicts really, when they're in their addiction, are really good at manipulating
Yeah.
and lying.
And
okay.
so what happened is, on August 14th,
Yep.
2007, I finally humbled myself before the Father's house, and I said, I've been ministering all summer long here, but I need your help.
Yeah.
And I asked them if they would come and pray for me. And you know who the first people that jumped up to pray was?
Who?
The people in Life Recovery Ministry.
Wow, the guys going through recovery themselves.
Yeah,
Wow.
they knew what I was going through,
Yeah.
and they probably knew what they put their parents through.
Yeah.
And so they come and pray for me, and the peace of God came on me. So I had to humble myself and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
I need you to help my family. And then, of course, everybody left except your mom.
Yeah, Vicky.
Yeah, and
Pastor Vicky, Mama Vicky.
and if you've ever had Vicky,
Yeah. I like Picky better though. We'll call her Picky.
okay. If you ever had Vicky pray with you at the altar, it is so important.
Yeah.
And so she goes, okay, I want to ask you some questions, and God's going to tell you, and I want you to tell me what God says to you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that was the clearest I've ever heard God's voice. And Vicky asked me something like, what's going to happen to Grant? And I heard God say, he's going to be okay.
Wow.
And then she said, did David and Susie have anything to worry about? And it was not a bit.
Wow.
And then how's Grant's relationship with Jesus? And it was like, he's going to serve the Lord.
Wow.
And then her last question was, how's this all going to turn out? And it was gloriously.
Wow. And this is when he was like at his lowest.
Yeah, well, it actually got worse after that.
Oh, okay.
And you know how it is? We get a promise from God. We think it's supposed to happen instantly.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't always work out
No, the
that way
enemy wants to make sure you doubt real well.
Yeah, I'm thinking Abraham. It took a long time for the promise, and sometimes promises don't happen right away. But I thought, I can't wait to tell Grant he's going to be okay and he's going to serve the Lord. But he was homeless, living in Chico in the zoo. Now the zoo in Chico was kind of like what Southside was before you guys came here.
Yeah.
Okay, it was kind of dangerous. Yep. And drugs everywhere, and so it was very concerning. But slowly he got better.
That's good.
And it seemed like he was okay.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to worry.
But you were telling me that there were a lot of times that word you got from the Lord was really what you held on to. You held on to it like with a white fist. And that's the thing is, if your son or daughter is going through addiction, or someone you love is going through addiction, you can go to God and you can ask for the truth. You can go to people like the Father's House that have some reputation on knowing how to help addicts.
Yes.
You don't have to do it by yourself. And that's the first thing Dave said is like, tell somebody, like be vulnerable. That's the only way that you're going to get help. So that's so good, Dave. So Grant goes along, long story, but he ends up in a rehab and hits his knees and asks God to, save him.
Yeah.
He ends up not being able to stay at that rehab for whatever reason, and you call the Father's House and pick up the story there.
Well, the first thing is he wasn't even going to go to rehab until he read a text that I gave Courtney.
Yeah.
That said, I wish if Grant was on drugs, he would just tell us so we could help him. Because he was beating drug tests by cheating them.
Cheating them, yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And if you want to know how they cheat drug tests, get a hold of the Father's House. They'll tell you. But we left him at the rehab place and, got some peace. And then the next week they were blacked out. We come back and he's like a different person. The life of God's in him. And I said, what happened to you? And he goes, I repented. I broke before God, and I surrendered my life to Jesus. And then he continued to grow.
That's so cool. So then he ends up in the School of Transformation, which is here at the Father's House, for with Jordy Mumby, and Jordy played a pivotal role in his life. Derek Devine played a pivotal role in his life. And he graduates on what day?
Well, what's interesting is remember on August 14th, 2007 is when Vicki gave me that word. But on August 14th, 2017, exactly 10 years later, and I'll tell you what, we had to thank God. I wrote that in my Bible, by the way, and every day I thank God that Grant's going to be okay.
Yeah.
We didn't have a bit to worry about. He was going to serve the Lord, and it was going to turn out gloriously. And so on August 14th, 2017 was Grant's last day of school transformation.
Isn't God good?
He's amazing.
10 years to the day you got that prophecy, you heard from the Lord, held on to it with your life. 10 years he graduates from school transformation, and we know Grant today, he is doing really well.
Yes.
Has not arrived, none of us have, but he is doing awesome, beyond imagination. And your family, you have such a good family. You have two amazing kids,
Oh, yes.
Katie and Chuck. And they've always been faithful and good.
Yes. And they've given us wonderful grandkids.
Yeah. That's awesome. You want to give a shout out to any of your grandkids?
Hey, Dylan, Mason, Connor, and Cora, Papa loves you. Can't wait to hug you.
Dave, thank you so much for being on tonight. Is there anything else? We have a couple seconds. Anything else you want to say specifically to people that have loved ones struggling with addiction?
Well, like I said, you got to humble yourself and tell somebody. And, I always held on to that promise as if it was mine. But I really think it's for any parent out there that you can make that your promise, that your child, maybe your spouse, someone that's a loved one will be okay, and that you don't have to worry, that they'll serve the Lord and it'll turn out gloriously. So if you need prayer for any family members, why don't you send a message in? So
that was really important. Make sure you're vulnerable about what's going on in your, with your family. Reach out for help and ask the Lord what he has to say and allow him to speak to you with the truth. But Dave and his family, they pray over other people's kids that are struggling with addiction, and they pray for them regularly.
Yes.
So he wanted to ask, if you have a loved one or someone that is in addiction that really needs help, if you want to put their name in the comments, if you want to private message me, Danielle Devine, with their name, and we can get that name to Dave and his prayer group, it's Prayer Warriors, and they can start praying for your loved one. Thank you for being on today, Dave. That light behind us went crazy again. But right now, we are going to have a commercial about our podcast, which is amazing. If you are not subscribed to our podcast, you need to do that on Apple, Android, doesn't matter, subscribe. And then right after that, we have the man, the legend, my husband, Derek Devine, bringing a pre-recorded message called The Jesus Man. Amen. Stay tuned.
We just got done recording another episode of the podcast, The Uncommon Truth.
It's a weekly podcast where we talk about Christianity the way Jesus intended it to be.
Here's a clip of one of our shows.
So church is really supposed to be a place where we come to give our life away. It isn't to receive, but receiving is the promise of God. So the giving comes from God. The church is the place where you give, and God gives the return, and it's abundant.
It's really good what he said. And for me, it's like, I think most people think that church is about them.
Yeah.
And I think even Francis Chan, his thing was, why would I, it's like I'm going to a church and this guy is going to bless me for 30 minutes and it's going to be all about me. It's one guy blessing, 500 people, 200 people. And it's a wrong idea. It's not one guy blessing 500 people. It's one guy speaking from the Lord, telling you who you are. Now go do it. It should be every person. And I agree with Steve. It's like you have the wrong impression of what Christianity. It's not about you. It's about Jesus. It's about going and giving your life away. But so often we just go to church on Sunday and it's all about feeling good, bless me, what do I get? But it's that, and then it's give it away.
If you'd like to subscribe, visit changeorville.org and click on podcasts. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you can get podcasts. So go ahead and subscribe, leave us a rating or a review so more people can find our show.
You'll actually hear practical examples and testimonies of how to follow Jesus in day-to-day life.
It literally will change your life. Check it out.
We're going to start off with a couple Bible verses out of Ephesians, which I've read numerous times and got a new spin put on it this week. So go ahead, Ryan, if you got it. It's Ephesians 22 through 25. This is a hot one, isn't it? Yeah. Wives, we'll wrap it up. Don't worry about it, all right? Settle down. And remember, it's the words of the Lord. So anyway, the words of God, yes. Inspired words of Jesus coming at you. Ephesians 22, wives, be subject to your own husband as to the Lord. Settle down. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. So it was, we all, like, we didn't know Vicky was going to say something about that one, huh? Shoot. I was on your side. Come on now. So anyway, reading 22 through 24 is really kind of just warming us up to 25, in my opinion, because I think this is just kind of based off my wife's opinion and our own conversations, but I think it's very easy for women to do that when husbands do verse 25 well. And so I don't think wives are supposed to do that well at all if husbands don't do verse 25 well at all. So the issue with verse 25 is, which I struggle with myself, is not always walking around with the thought process of what Jesus truly went through. So I got to spend this week really just reading a lot about the crucifixion and what Jesus actually went through, because actually he's calling us to do that for our wives. And so we really have to break down 25 and what that really means, the responsibility that's being placed upon us, what Jesus is truly asking and requiring of us. And the tough thing is I don't think there's a whole lot of women being pursued by men with that understanding of this is what they should be receiving. This is what he should look like. This is what he should resemble. And he should have somebody in his life that's holding him to that standard, right? That's why we talk about discipleship, being able to follow another man. That's why we talk about accountability, because verse 25 is difficult. It's very difficult to do, especially more than one day, right? Because I start finding myself in verse 25, it's like, man, that's so difficult, because, man, I find myself at times like I don't want to get up with the kid in the middle of the night. And you just kind of sitting there every once in a while like, man, I hope she says she'll do it. Seriously, though, don't raise your hand, but everybody had been there, Or, my wife's big get down is like she'll sit and watch chiropractic videos on Facebook. Swear to you. And even though, you want to talk about trust, I don't know, it's weirdo, but you want to talk about trust, she'll actually ask me to try to do this stuff for her. I'm thinking, hey, okay. But anyway, so she's showing me this stuff, so it's gotten to the point where she has a whole routine, like, you're just clack, and then, and you're doing everything, right? And it gets to the point where I'm just like, if this woman asks me to do another chiropractic thing, I'm gonna just flip out. So, but then it just brings me back to like, man, I can't even just, take 5 minutes to run her through her, recall thing or whatever she wants to run. But, I get so selfish in some of my stuff. It's, I tell you, 9 times out of 10, I'm just, and then honestly, though, I'm a practical person. I want to get down to the point where it's like, I can't even do something like that. How do you do something real? How am I going to sit here and show because I look at it like, well, how I treat my wife every day is how my daughters are going to be looking to be pursued down the road. And it's like, man, I can't even sit here and, even as much as we laugh, it's kind of like, man, it takes like 2 minutes. It's like, man, I can't even do something I don't want to do for 2 minutes. It's kind of embarrassing when you break it down and think about it. And in a way, so it's like I've sat here and not been willing to die to myself on a daily basis, which I really should be, minute by minute, because that's just an opportunity for me to be there, and whether I think it's stupid or not doesn't matter. It's the fact that that's something that my wife feels me serving her. My wife feels like that's something that I'm there for, and that's just one of a million examples that we could come up with. And I think a lot of this comes back to just kind of how the world's defined what a man should be and what a husband-wife relationship should look like, which a lot of that looks like, well, let's just stop at verse whatever it was, 22, and not read any further. And what we really, for me, it's like as much as I need practice and work on it, I want to get to 25, man, because I want to find out what's my job. You want to? I like the fact that I'm called to more because I want more to be required of me than what's required of my wife. But then, man, that's got to be so much more on the fact of, why am I sitting here throwing a fit about that? Why am I not the first one like, no, baby, go to sleep. I got this. I'll wake up again. Why is that not every time? Because, man, I want verse 25 in my life. I want my wife to sit here and be just with every ounce of her being wanting to submit because I do verse 25 so well. And it's ingrained in women if you look at it, because I have 2 little girls, and man, it's ingrained in them to want to follow and submit and have dad be pleased by stuff that they're doing. That's no different than my wife. It's no different at all if I'm actually doing verse 25. And so for me, I'm starting to realize there's a lot of stuff that the world has just kind of heaped on me, or that I've embraced, that I've walked in, that I've made a habit of, that stopped verse 25 from becoming important on a daily basis, because I'm not letting the right things define me. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, so I wonder, how can I read over this? Because I've read Ephesians a ton. How can I read that, man, and not just get stuck on 25 and have somebody have to come and be like, oh, why do you feel like such a failure? Come on, man, let's go. It's just I keep reading over it. We're just on to chapter 6, when I really should just be planted on this and finding the holes in all the other areas of my life that go against that. Like rolling my eyes when she wants to get the chiropractic table out. Seriously, though, it's like, or she wants her feet rubbed, or she wants to go to bed early so that I can get up and I get up with the kids. Like, she had a long night so she can sleep in so that I can get up and do the lunches and the breakfast and all that. Whatever it is. And for me, oftentimes, it's just not happening as often as it should. Verse 25 is not focused on as much as it should. And that's where a lot of our discipleship, that's where a lot of our accountability comes into play, because it helps us become more successful, because we're able to have somebody that's able to look outside looking in, kind of like Ryan was sharing in that video. I was willing to take advice from a man and apply it to my life. See, I'm all about application. And for me, it's like, once I read something like that, I need to find out, well, how do I become successful? And the number one thing we have to do, the problem is the world's defining what husband and man is. And we need to start looking at, if we're Jesus followers, we need to start looking at, well, what does Jesus say? So then we have to start looking into the crucifixion, right? What Jesus Christ actually did for us, because that's huge. It's everything. And if you just take up a couple articles, you just Google facts of the crucifixion, it'd blow your mind. And start realizing, wow, the fact that I was even placed in a comparison to do something of that sort for my wife, at least I started realizing how much I fell short. Fell short a lot. Because my wife is a very, very strong woman, and I remember it pretty much kind of started right when I saw her and started dating her. We met at an athletic Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp, and I remember I got back and told a couple of my buddies, hey, I met this girl, blah, blah, blah. Oh, what's her name? Okay. I'm saying, oh, she plays basketball at Arizona State. And I'm telling you, numerous times, I get off the phone, 30 seconds later, have you Googled this chick, man? Have you Googled this woman? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Because I didn't even know. And you start finding that she was just all this, all that, Miss California, all these things. And for me, I was kind of like, oh, my word. And then you start dating her, and she beats you at bowling. Or she'll beat you at ping pong, or putt-putt golf, or, and then you start getting into, like, just serious stuff like basketball and horse and, like, physical sports where men should always win type stuff. And then for me, it was a very big source of pride, And it's not like she'd stay quiet about it. She'd run her mouth constantly about it, But honestly, so that would transfer into to more serious subjects, because I didn't grow up in a Christian household. And my wife came from like Christian royalty as I came down to the Father's house and saw. And so I got to the point where I started to realize, if I'm going to marry this woman, there's going to be places she's going to have to lead, because I'm not ready. Otherwise, because, I mean, obviously, why did Christ die for us? Because he loved us, to protect us, to save us from ourselves, right? And so if I'm the Jesus in this scenario for my wife, then I must do what's best for her. And there were several instances what was best for my wife was for me not to be leading. And you try to explain that to men on the planet. Dead serious. There'd be everybody, oh, you just ain't a man then. And it's like, well, see, I look at that as, well, I'm actually protecting my wife, so then who's not what? And then it got to a point because my wife was able to see those things. Then she was also able to see my growth. And then had such a desire when I had reached that point to completely relinquish control and submit and let me lead. Because I did verse 25 well. So therefore, she could do 22 through 24 well. And so then we have to continue to look at, well, what are these other areas in life? Because, well, then we come down here and she's running like the business office and running all the businesses. And I worked at one of them, so she's like telling me what to do, which was daily like self-evaluation. And it was daily failure for years. And like she ran the mud run. She was like in charge of the mud run. And it would just drive me nuts because it was just my pride and my arrogance and my insecurity and all these things of realizing, what's my job here? My job here is to make my wife successful. Right? My job here is to make the mud run successful. And to make the mud run successful, it's my job to make my wife successful. And unfortunately, we don't have to talk about how long that took, but it took years to come to the realization of how my definition of a man was not working for my marriage. So if it's not working for that, well, then there's no possible way that it could work for my kids and work for our family. And there's no way it could work for me helping anybody who wanted to be accountable. There's no way I could disciple anyone because I wasn't doing it on the home front. That's because I was letting the wrong things define what I was doing and how I was doing it. So I continued to let the world define what I was doing, and we do this every single day in so many different topics. And this is the major one this is a major one we're going to focus on because men need to learn how to be husbands. And men that aren't husbands need to learn how to pursue a wife to Ephesians 5:25 so that they can learn from, please God, for my mistakes. Or whoever it is that you're following, learning from their mistakes, because you should be a student of it. You should be learning. You should be constantly preparing. My first mentor told me, hey, you need to be preparing for your wife even if she's nowhere to be seen. And that's something we constantly practice here at the Father's House Church through purity, through honesty, through loyalty, through accountability, through discipleship, through a lot of these topics that we're going to be bringing and talking about, through a lot of the foundational things that we have here at the Father's House Church. And so this is a big one that I just want to make sure that we're bringing to your attention because the call of men is so strong. And if we don't know what we're supposed to be doing, and if we don't know what we're called to, and if we don't have the proper definition for it, then there's no way we can fulfill that calling. And so those are the things that we have to continue to be doing. Those are the things that we have to continue to push into, is fighting a lot of the arrogance and the pride and a lot of the things that come up to, and start asking ourselves, okay, well, how can I die for my wife today? How can I die for my kids? How can I die for my community? Because then we have to go into what, just like Orion talked a couple weeks ago about having your throne in order, having your priorities together. Because we said how that looks as if you're married, right? It's your wife, then your kids, then everybody else, then you. So say you don't got any of those things, well, then it's still everybody else and then you. So I still got to apply this to my community. I still got to apply this to every single person that I come into contact with, which I'm way worse at than even that. So these are things, man, where as men, we need to constantly be willing to self-reflect, constantly willing to look inside ourselves, because women actually are looking for us to lead them. And a lot of them are having to just lead themselves because we're not doing our job. And the coolest thing that I've seen is the fact that my wife wants to be led. My girls want that. They're just waiting for somebody to do it. And so we have to really look at ourselves and see, well, what example are we bringing them? How are we going about this on a daily basis? And so we have to mix that. We have to find out, well, what are we going to let define not just our Christianity, which needs to be the verses that we're reading and applying them to our lives. But, what's defining being a husband? What's defining being a man? And then how do I do that? Because if we are able to do that, so much success comes. So much success comes. And as I got a lot of these other areas in my life put together, like being discipled, being willing to follow, being accountable, and learning what that looks like, submission in certain areas that my wife was so much better at than me became so much easier. Because I started to come to the realization of what her expectation was, and it wasn't just what hers was, it was what Jesus was telling her I should be doing and what I should look like. And so for me, reading a lot of this stuff, I constantly looked at it from a standpoint of, well, what is Jesus commanding me to do? Because I have to take this seriously. And I know the truth now, so my wife is wanting that. So how do I provide that? Because my wife sat around for years waiting for somebody to pursue her. For years. 22 of them? 23 of them? 23 of them. I realized one on the altar, she gave me a journal that she had been writing for, and it was like that thick, of letters she'd been writing since she was a little old girl, writing and preparing for her husband. And so I remember the first time I really read these words, it was such a sense of responsibility came over me. Of, man, like, this is what a woman's wanting. Like, this is all the way from literally from a 10-year-old, where they're just playing like prince and princess, all the way up to 22 years old, all the way through letters, through when we were dating and everything. And it's like, man, that gave me so much motivation to be everything that she wanted. But I still had to put that together with, well, what was Jesus wanting me to do? Because that would be so much better for her. And if some of that stuff lines up, well, then great. I'm a big AM radio guy. I like listening to like sports talk radio. And I don't know, anybody on board with that? No? So I like listening to Dan Patrick had Coach K on this morning. Coach K coaches for Duke basketball team. And he was talking about, because he's had a lot of experience with like the USA men's basketball team and coached the dream team, was one of the coaches on a dream team and coached Kobe Bryant. They were talking about Kobe Bryant since all the helicopter crash and everything. And he was just talking about how there was such a willingness within just a select few players that he was talking about, because he's coached a lot of very, very talented athletes. He was talking about Kobe Bryant's just desire every day was just to get better. And his desire just outweighed everybody else's desire that was even around. And so for me, it's like, coming from an athletic background, I'm trying to find ways, well, how do I take that? How do I take that type of drive? Because I have a lot of that. And it's like, how do I apply that to the stuff that's important? And so with reading this stuff, it's kind of like, well, how do I wake up every single day with that just constant desire to be something different? And to go after that every single day, remembering what Jesus Christ did for me. And then in tune realizing that I have to go and do that for somebody. I mean, you guys really should take just 5-10 minutes and Google just some of the just gruesome facts of what what our God went through for us. And then let the weight of Ephesians 5:25 come upon you. And women, you really need to let the weight of Ephesians 5:25 come upon you so you understand what you're worth, how you should be pursued, how you should be treated, how you should be loved, how you should be pursued, truly pursued, so that you understand what a man's true calling is and what God's true calling is upon us, because he's requiring a lot out of us. And because I'm doing this, it then allows my wife to flourish. It allows my wife to be successful. It allows my wife to reach her full potential. You know, mine is just one teeny little part in all the other parts that have helped make the mud run so successful. But it was like, I know that my part helped. The fact that I've just said, hey, whatever you need from me. Doesn't matter what it looks like. I don't care if I was like in parking last year. You know what I mean? It was just like, hey, that's where I'm assigned, so I'm here. You know? And so for me, I want us at the point where we're really trying to focus on not only this, but taking this into every area. How can we serve people with this? And putting this much importance on the words of Jesus, on the words that are come out of this Bible. We should put that much importance on everything, on every single word that we're reading, and then finding out how do we apply that to our lives. And so today, honestly, how do you apply this to you? As a man, as a married man, okay. So then how do you apply it as a single man? How do you apply it as a man that's dating a woman? Women, how do you apply that to your husband? How do you apply that to a man that's trying to date you? Or how are you going to apply that when somebody does try to date you? So this is what I encourage you guys in, to the point where we're really starting to define what a man's role is around here. And we're going to start really focusing on that. And we're going to have higher expectations for what we're supposed to be doing. And there's going to be a deeper pressure to be discipled, to be accountable, to have your throne in order, to live sexually pure, to grow closer to Jesus, to follow his words, to realize that they're real, and to use them every single day to make not only ourselves better, but every single other person that we come into contact better. Right? And a lot of that starts at the home front. A lot of that starts at the home front. And if you're just a single guy living by yourself, it still starts there. What are you doing every single day to pursue Jesus Christ and apply what he's calling us to do? So I ask you guys really to just look over Ephesians 22 through 25, because it's not just talking about married men. There's so many other places in life you can apply that. So my challenge to you guys tonight is to apply that to your life and find out how you can do it. Are you applying Ephesians 5:25 or not? What does that look like for you? And the greatest thing about it is it's every single day. You have to continue to ask yourself that. It's not something that you can just check off and be done with it and say you accomplished that. Every single day I can either be successful in that or I can fail in that. And so I need to find a way every single day to have a desire to pursue that even further, even deeper.
Wow. I mean, that was such a good message. I am impartial. That is my husband, Derek Devine. But he is one of the pastors here at the Father's house, and that was so powerful. It was, if you didn't laugh, I mean, I laughed. But anyways, it was such a good message on what is the role of men in the church. What is the role of men in relationships? And Derek Devine bringing that word on Ephesians 5, if you missed it, 22 through 25. So tonight we talked about the Jesus man. And women, the truth is God calls men to lead. God calls men to lead his church. And I know that's hard for some of us women to understand. And so tomorrow, my mom and I, Vicky, are going to talk about women. What's our role and what is God trying to tell us? Is it a good thing to be a woman? And I know in my life, through sports and stuff, I've struggled with the fact that maybe women aren't called to great things, or, you know, we're just the doormat or whatever. But that is not God's call on my life. It's not God's call on your life. And when Jesus men stand up like Derek Devine and create a safe place for women to thrive, I mean, you are going to see such an incredibly healthy church, and women who respond and allow men to lead and lift them up and promote them. It's like two people dying to each other. That's what marriage is. That's what it's supposed to be men and women. And so tomorrow I'm so excited. We're going to have Vicky Arcillo here, and we're going to talk about women. What is our role as women of faith? And then Wednesday night, we're going to have church at 6 o'clock. And then Thursday, we're going to talk about parents. How, you know, some how-tos with parents, just some real talk stuff in dealing with kids, especially during this time with the coronavirus. It is so difficult sometimes being home all day and everything's closed. Dave Connor, he had to leave, but I just wanted to say that he accidentally said his son was homeless living on the streets. But he wasn't. We want to correct that. Want to make sure that we're true. He was couch surfing, which, you can define that however you want at that time. But he didn't have a place of his own. So we wanted to make sure we correct that. But I hope you guys had a great night tonight. I hope you enjoyed that amazing, powerful message. For this first night of our series, Real Talk, Real Faith. We'll be back tomorrow for Women of Faith. I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.